I have killed humans. I want to say that first before I tell you about the one who unmade me, because otherwise you'll think I was always the kind of soldier who could be unmade, and I wasn't. I was good at the war. I was proud of being good at it. And then I lay in the mud of a ridge on a world neither of our peoples should have wanted, bleeding, watching a human do a thing I had no place in my mind to put, and I have not been the same soldier or the same person from that hour to this one. Let me tell you where we were, because the where is in my bones now and won't leave. The world was called Tannic Ridge by your side, and something else by mine, and nothing at all by the world itself, which had no people of its own, just rock and rain, and a long contested spine of high ground that both our armies had decided was worth dying for. I never understood why. That's the truth no soldier says out loud. Most of us never knew why we were on that ridge, only that we'd been told to take it and the humans had been told to hold it. And so, we spent a season feeding each other into the mud over a strip of high ground that grew nothing and meant nothing, and that I could not, even now, find a single good reason for. It rained the whole time. That's the first thing I remember, the rain. A thin, cold, ceaseless rain that turned the ridge to a gray soup and got into everything, your armor, your food, the wounds of the dying. The ground was churned to mud so deep that men drowned in it, both sides, drowned in shell holes full of gray water with the rain coming down. The sound was constant, the guns, the human artillery and ours, a noise so steady you stopped hearing it the way you stop hearing your own heart, and under it the smaller sounds, the wet sounds, the sounds of the wounded that I will not describe to you. It was the worst place I have ever been. I had been in a dozen battles before Tannic and I thought I knew war. Tannic taught me I had only known the clean parts. I am Khessa. My people are not your people. We are bigger than you and harder shelled, and we live longer, and we had been at war with humanity for 6 years over a string of border worlds that, looking back, neither of us needed. You were the enemy. I want to be honest about how I saw you then, because the change is the whole story and you can't measure a change without knowing where it started. I thought humans were vermin, not as an insult, as a category. You bred fast and you fought past sense and you would not stay beaten. And to a soldier that doesn't read as courage, it reads as infestation, a thing that keeps coming no matter how much of it you kill. We had a word for the way humans fought, and the word meant, roughly, the tide that does not know it has lost. I'd watched humans charge positions they could not take, die in numbers that should have broken any sane people's will, and come again, and I had concluded, the way you do, that they simply did not value their own lives the way real people did. That was easier than the truth. The truth was that they valued something more than their lives, and I did not yet have the eyes to see what. I first saw her across the wire. That's how it started, 2 weeks before the day on the ridge, just a glimpse through the rain. There was a stretch of no man's land between our forward trench and the human line, a churned dead strip maybe 100 lengths wide, and across it in the gray, I saw a human moving where no human should have been able to move, out in the open, in the killing ground, upright, slow, unhurried, in the middle of a battlefield where to stand up was to die. And it wasn't charging. That was the strange thing. It wasn't attacking. It was moving from shape to shape out there in the mud, the still shapes, the fallen, kneeling beside each one, and I understood after a moment that it was a medic. A human corpsman, out in the open killing ground, going to the wounded. That alone wasn't strange. Both sides had medics, war makes them. What was strange, what made me lower my own weapon and watch instead of fire, which I am not proud of as a soldier but cannot regret as a person, was that she was slow, calm. She moved through that ground where every other living thing crawled or ran or died, as though the rain were the only thing falling, as though the guns were whether she decided not to mind, and there was in the way she moved a gentleness so total and so out of place that it stopped me. I had never seen anything move gently on a battlefield. Battlefields don't permit it. Everything on a battlefield is fast and frightened, even the brave things, especially the brave things, because bravery is just fear that keeps moving. She wasn't fast and she wasn't frightened. She was gentle in the middle of the worst place in the world, and the gentleness was so foreign that my mind couldn't classify it as anything but a kind of madness, and I thought, watching her, that one will be dead by nightfall. The gentle ones always die first. The ridge eats the soft. She didn't die by nightfall. She didn't die for 2 weeks. I started watching for her, the way you watch for anything that breaks the pattern of a place that's trying to kill you, and every day or two there she'd be, out in the killing ground in the rain, gentle, slow, going to the fallen, and the human line called her something I caught eventually through our listening gear, a name they said with a particular warmth, and the name was Wren. The humans on that ridge loved her. You could hear it in how they said the name. And my side, we started to know her too, the way you come to know a landmark, and the men in my trench developed a strange relationship to her that I have thought about a great deal since. We didn't shoot her. I want to tell you that plainly because it shocked me at the time and shocks me still. There was an unspoken thing, never ordered, never discussed, that you did not fire on the gentle human in the killing ground. Some of it was the soldiers' old superstition about medics, the sense that the people who tend the wounded are under a kind of truce older than any treaty. But some of it was the gentleness. There is something in even a hardened killer that does not want to be the one who puts down the soft thing moving slow in the rain. And so we let her work, both sides, an accidental island of mercy in the middle of a season of mud and dying. And I think every soldier on that ridge, mine and yours, was quietly grateful for her without ever being able to say why. Because here is the thing I didn't understand yet, the thing the ridge had not yet revealed. We all thought Wren was gentle because she was soft, because she'd somehow kept a tenderness the war hadn't burned out of her, a leftover sweetness, fragile, the kind of thing a battlefield destroys. We pitied her a little, even as we were grateful, the way you pity a flower growing in a place that will kill it. The gentle ones always die first. We were certain of it. We were waiting, in some buried part of us, for the ridge to do to Wren what it did to all the soft things, to harden her or kill her, because those were the only 2 endings the ridge gave, and gentleness was not a thing that survived on Tannic. It could not be. We had all of us learned that in blood. We were wrong about her in a way I can barely explain even now, with all the years between. We thought her gentleness was the soft part, the part the war would take. It was the opposite. It was the hardest thing on that ridge, harder than my shell, harder than the rock both our armies died for, the single most unbreakable thing in that whole gray drowning hell. And we were about to find out, all of us, on the worst day Tannic ever saw, that the gentle human in the killing ground was not a soft thing the war had failed to harden. She was a hard thing that had chosen to be gentle, every day in the worst place in the world on purpose against everything. And that is a different thing entirely, and it is the most dangerous thing I have ever encountered, and it ended the war on that ridge, and it ended the soldier I was, and I have been trying to deserve what it made me ever since. That's where I have to stop this first time. Because the day it all came clear, the day the human line broke and the wounded were left in the open, and I was one of them, bleeding in the mud of the ridge, an enemy soldier at the mercy of a battlefield that gave no mercy. The day I learned who Wren really was, when she came across the killing ground through the rain toward the fallen and did not stop at the human ones, that's the whole of it, and I need you standing exactly here first. In the cold gray rain on a ridge that ate the soft, watching a gentle human move slow among the dying, certain, the way we were all certain, that we understood what gentleness was and how little of it the world allows. We understood nothing. The ridge was about to teach us. The day it broke, the rain finally stopped, and I have always thought that was the cruelest thing the ridge ever did, that it cleared the sky for the worst of it, as if to make sure we all saw. It was a general assault. Ours. The command had decided, after a season of feeding men into the mud for nothing, that the ridge would be taken in one great push. And so at dawn on a gray clearing morning they sent us all forward at once, every trench emptying into the killing ground, and the humans on the high line did what humans do, which is not break. We came up the slope into their guns and they held, and the killing ground became, for a few hours, the worst thing I have ever been inside, worse than all the season before it put together. I won't give you the battle. You don't want the battle and I don't want to give it. I'll give you only the part that matters, which is that somewhere in the middle of it, going up that slope, I was hit. I don't remember being hit. That's how it goes. The big wounds don't announce themselves, they just rearrange the world, and one moment I was moving up the slope and the next I was down in the mud with the sky wrong above me, and a heat spreading through my side that I knew, with a soldier's flat certainty, was very bad. I'd seen enough of my own kind die to know the look of my own dying. I lay in a shell hole half full of gray water with the battle going on over me, and I understood that I was going to bleed out on Tannic Ridge for a strip of rock I'd never understood the point of. And the strange thing, the thing I remember most, is how little I minded. You make your peace early in a war like that. I'd made mine a season ago. I lay in the mud and waited to stop, and the assault rolled on past me, both directions, and I was left behind in the killing ground the way the wounded always are, alone between the lines with the dead. And then the assault failed. Of course it failed. They always failed, that ridge, 6 years of failing. Our push broke against the human line and what was left of it fell back, and the killing ground was suddenly full of the fallen. Ours mostly, hundreds of us. The wreckage of a failed assault scattered across the open ground between the trenches, the wounded crying out in the gray light, and no one coming because no one could come because to go out into that ground was to die, and both armies knew it, and so we were left, the hundreds of us, to do the slow arithmetic of bleeding alone in the open. That is when I saw her. She came over the human parapet while the smoke was still hanging, while the guns were still going, while every rule of the battlefield said stay down, stay back, the wounded in the open are lost, let them go. She came over the top alone, the gentle human, Wren, with her medic's kit and her slow, unhurried walk, out into a killing ground freshly carpeted with the enemy's wounded. With our wounded, with my people, the ones who just spent the morning trying to kill her and everyone she loved, and she went to the nearest fallen shape, and she knelt, and she began to work. On us, on my people, on the enemy. I have to make you understand what this was, because if you're human it might sound like simply what a good medic does, and it was not. It was the opposite of everything a battlefield is. Her own side's wounded were back behind the parapet, safe, reachable. The wounded out in the open were ours, Khessa, my people, the ones who'd come up the slope that morning to kill her. There was no reason on the ridge for her to go to them. They were the enemy. They were the ones who'd made the killing ground a killing ground. Every law of war, every instinct of survival, every cold sense of which lives were hers to save, said leave the enemy wounded where they fell. And she walked out into the open under both armies' guns alone, and she went to the enemy first, to the nearest fallen, which happened to be ours, and she knelt in the mud beside a dying Khessa soldier, and she began, gently, certainly, to try to save his life. The guns stopped. Not all at once, but they stopped. Because both armies were watching the same impossible thing, and you cannot fire into a killing ground where a single gentle human is kneeling over your enemy's wounded, working to save the men she should by every right have left to die. Our gunners couldn't fire, they'd hit her, and she was saving our men. The human gunners couldn't fire, they'd hit her, and she was theirs. She had walked into the one space on the entire ridge where no one could shoot, and she had made that space with her own body and her own gentleness, and she moved through it from fallen shape to fallen shape, ours and hers alike, kneeling, working, gentle, slow, while two armies that had spent a season drowning each other in mud sat in their trenches and watched, their guns gone silent, unable to do the only thing they knew how to do. She reached me near the end. I'd watched her cross half that ground to get to me, watched her kneel over a dozen of my people. Some she saved and some she couldn't, and the ones she couldn't she stayed with anyway. a hand on them until they stopped. And then she was there, over me, in the gray light with the smoke clearing. And I got my first close look at the gentle human we'd all been so certain the ridge would kill. She was young, younger than I'd thought, younger than the warmth in the human voices that said her name. And she was tired in a way that went past her face into something underneath, the specific exhaustion of a person who has decided to carry a thing too heavy and simply does not put it down. And she looked at me, an enemy soldier, a Khessa, one of the people who'd come to kill her that very morning, bleeding out in the mud, and there was no hesitation in her. None, no flicker of this one is the enemy. And she put her hands on my wound the same way she'd put them on her own people's, gentle cert. And she said something to me in human speech that I didn't understand then and had translated for me later, and what she said was, "Easy. I've got you. Stay with me." I've got you, to me. The enemy. The thing my whole army called the tide that does not know it is lost, said with such certainty, such ownership, "I've got you," as if I were hers to keep, as if there were no side of the line I could be on that would make me not hers to save. And I understood, lying there with her hand stopping my blood, the thing the whole ridge had been wrong about. We thought her gentleness was the soft part, the leftover sweetness the war would take. We pitied the flower in the killing field. But there was nothing soft in the hands that held my wound shut. There was nothing fragile in the woman who'd walked alone into two armies' guns to kneel over her enemies. Her gentleness wasn't the part the war had failed to harden. Her gentleness was a thing harder than the war, a decision, made and remade every single day in the worst place in the world, to treat every fallen thing as hers, regardless of its side, regardless of what it had come to do to her. That is not softness. Softness breaks. I had watched a season of soft things break on that ridge. Ren did not break. Ren walked into the place that broke everything and stayed gentle on purpose. And the staying gentle on purpose in a place built to destroy it was the strongest act of will I have witnessed in a long, hard life full of strong men doing violent things. The gentle ones don't always die first. That's the lie the ridge tells. Sometimes the gentle one is the only thing on the whole field that the ridge cannot touch, because she has already decided the one thing the ridge most needs you not to decide, that mercy is worth more than survival, and that she will spend hers on the enemy if the enemy is the one bleeding in front of her. And then, this is the part I have never been able to tell without stopping, then a soldier came. One of my own, a Khessa, from a flanking trench that had a line on the killing ground the others didn't, who either didn't understand the silence or didn't care, who saw a human kneeling over Khessa wounded and saw only an enemy among our fallen, and raised his weapon to do the thing soldiers do. And I was on the ground, bleeding, with her hands in my wound, and I had a half-second to choose what kind of thing I was, and I want you to know that I did not choose it as a saint. I chose it as a man who had just been called hers, who had just been told I've got you by the only creature on that ridge who'd ever treated my life as worth keeping. That's where I have to stop. Because what I did in that half-second, with my own soldier's weapon rising toward the gentle human who'd crossed an army to save me, and what it set off across that whole silent watching ridge, is the resolution of the entire thing. The moment the war on Tannic ended not because anyone won but because a gentle human had shown both armies, at once, in the cleared gray light, who she really was, and made every soldier on that ridge, mine and yours, have to decide whether they could keep being what they'd been after they'd seen it. I shielded her. That's the whole of what I did, and it was almost nothing, and it was everything. I was on the ground, bleeding, weak, with her hand still in my wound. I could not have stopped a soldier's shot. I could not have fought. I had nothing left in me to fight with. But I had my body, what was left of it, and the soldier rising to fire at her was on my side, my own kind. And I knew that a Khessa would hesitate for just a moment, the moment that mattered, to fire through one of his own. So I did the only thing my failing body could do. I rolled. I put myself between Ren and the rising weapon, my own broken side toward my own soldier's gun, and I lifted one arm, and I made the gesture of my people that means hold. That means this one is under my protection. That means you will go through me first. And I looked at my own comrade down the length of his weapon, and I told him in our own speech, the truest thing I have ever said. She is saving our wounded, lower it, she is saving ours. And he hesitated, the moment, and in the moment the whole ridge held its breath. Because this is the thing about a silence made by mercy, it is unbearably fragile, and everyone in it knows the fragility, and everyone in it is waiting in some buried place to find out whether it will be allowed to hold or whether someone will be the one to break it. Two armies had gone quiet watching a gentle human cross the killing ground. The silence was a held thing, a held breath, a question being asked of every soldier on that ridge at once. Now that you have seen this, what are you? And my own soldier stood with his weapon half raised at a wounded comrade who'd thrown himself in the way, and he had to answer the question, out loud, with his trigger, in front of both armies, and I watched him answer it. He lowered the weapon. He lowered it, and he didn't say anything, and he sank down where he stood as though something had gone out of his legs, and I understood that he had just felt the same thing I'd felt, the thing Ren's hands had put into me, the unbearable recognition that the woman in the mud was treating our lives as worth keeping, and that to fire on her was to declare, in front of everyone, that you disagreed, that you thought the wounded should be left to die, that mercy was the enemy. And no one, this is the thing I learned on Tannic Ridge that I have carried ever since. No one wants to be the one who says that out loud, with their own hands, where everyone can see. In the dark, in the abstract, in the trench at night, a soldier can believe the enemy's wounded should be left to rot. But in the cleared gray light, with a gentle human kneeling over a dying man, asked to be the one to break the mercy, almost no one can do it. The gentleness called the bluff of the entire war. It made every soldier on that ridge choose, in the open, whether they were truly the thing the war had told them to be, and it turned out that almost none of us were. What happened next happened slowly, and it was the strangest thing I have ever been part of, and there is no battle in any of our histories that ends the way Tannic ended. Other medics came out. Human ones first. Ren's own people, seeing her unfired upon in the killing ground, came over the parapet to help her slowly, hands visible, and the human line did not fire on them and our line did not fire on them, because the silence was holding, because Ren had made a space and the space was widening. And then I will remember this until I am dust. Then our people came out. Khessa, from my own trenches. Our own medics, and then our own soldiers, unarmed, hands open, came up out of the mud into the killing ground to help carry the wounded, ours and theirs. Because once one side has crossed into the mercy, the other cannot stay in the killing. It becomes unbearable. The contrast becomes unbearable, and the only way to stop being the army still pointing guns at the people saving your wounded is to put the guns down and go help. Two armies came out of their trenches into the killing ground and did not fight. They gathered the wounded, together. Khessa hands and human hands lifting Khessa and human bodies out of the gray water and the mud, side by side, in a silence that was no longer the silence of held breath but something else, something I did not have a word for then and barely have one for now, the silence of people who have just remembered all at once that the thing across from them was never the category they'd been killing, that it was always just the wounded, the frightened, the far from home, the same on both sides, and that one gentle human had walked out into the open and shown them by refusing to see the line that the line had never been real. The battle for Tannic Ridge did not resume. That is the part the histories struggle with, because there was no surrender and no victory and no treaty signed on the ridge. There was just a day when two armies came out of their trenches to gather the wounded together, and then could not, somehow, go back to killing each other afterward. You cannot carry a man's bleeding enemy to safety beside him and then climb back into your trench and shoot at him in the morning. Something breaks that won't mend, or rather something mends that won't break again. The assault was not renewed. The order came down on both sides, eventually in the careful language of command, to withdraw from the ridge, both of us, away from the strip of rock neither had ever needed, and I have always believed that the commands were a fiction the generals told to cover the truth, which was that the soldiers had simply stopped. The war went on elsewhere for a while, but it never came back to Tannic. The ridge that ate the soft for a season became, in a single cleared gray morning, the one place in the whole war where the killing stopped and would not start again. And it was not a victory of arms. It was the victory of one tired young human who would not stop being gentle in the worst place in the world. Ren lived. I need you to know that because the story wants her to die. The shape of stories wants the gentle one to die for the mercy, and she didn't. She walked out of that killing ground at the end of the day on her own feet, exhausted past speaking, having saved more lives in one morning than I had taken in 6 years, and most of them enemy lives, my people's lives, mine. She lived. I made sure in the years after to learn that she lived, that she went home eventually when the war finally ended, that she got to grow old, and the knowing of it is one of the few clean joys I have left. I never spoke to her again. There was no moment for it. The day ended in the chaos of 2 armies tending the wounded, and I was carried off to be mended by hands that I understood with a strange wonder might have been human or might have been my own. I was past telling and past caring, which was the whole point. But I have thought about her every day of the long life her hands gave me back. The gentle human in the killing ground. The one we were all so sure the ridge would take, because we believed gentleness was the soft thing, the weak thing, the thing the world destroys. We had it exactly backwards. That's the thing I carry. We thought she was gentle because she was soft, and the battlefield would reveal the softness and break it. The battlefield did reveal her, but what it revealed was the opposite of soft. It revealed that her gentleness was the single hardest thing on that whole ridge, harder than the rock, harder than my shell, harder than 6 years of war, because it was not a thing that had survived the war by luck. It was a thing she chose, in the teeth of everything, every single day, in the one place built to make it impossible. And a gentleness that survives the worst place in the world is not weakness wearing a kind face. It is the strongest thing there is. It is the only thing strong enough to stop a war that nothing else could stop. People who tell this story now, my people, they say it like a tale of a fearsome hidden warrior. She looked gentle until the battlefield revealed who she really was, and they expect the reveal to be a sword under the soft coat, a killer in the kind face. And every time I correct them, and every time they're disappointed, because the truth is stranger and harder than the tale they want. The battlefield revealed who she really was. They've got that part right. It revealed that she was gentle, all the way down on purpose, where it was hardest for the enemy. And that turned out to be the most dangerous thing on the entire ridge. The one thing 2 armies in 6 years and a season of mud could not defeat. The thing that walked out alone into the guns and made the whole war stop and look at itself, and could not be answered, and would not break. I have killed humans. I told you that at the start. I will not pretend I haven't, and I will not let the story make me clean. But I have not killed anyone since the morning on Tannic Ridge, and I never will again. And the reason is a tired young woman who knelt in the mud over the body of her enemy and said to me, to the thing my whole army had taught me I was, the 4 words that ended my war. I've got you, stay. I stayed, I've been staying ever since. That's what her gentleness did. It didn't kill me, the way the ridge killed the soft. It kept me alive long enough to become someone worth keeping.